Hello, Mark Tucker here.
Hey, Alan Furstenberg here, and we are Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Hey, welcome, Alan. It's good to see you again.
Always good to see you, Mark. It's been one of the, I don't know about you, it's been one of those weeks here, so I'm really glad for a chance for us to talk.
Yeah, it's been good. It's been busy. It seems like it's been a week and a half crammed into 4 days this week, but it's good to always take a break and chat with you about some interesting things. Something kind of interesting happened this last week that I just thought that people would be interested. I posted it out on Twitter recently to let people know about something called Alexa Verifier. Now this is going to be hard for me to say. Alexa Verifier Middleware.
Alexa-verifier-middleware. Okay, so I have a guess at what each of those words mean individually, but I'm not quite sure what it means when we put them together. So what are we talking about here?
Okay, so let's break it up and we'll just handle it one word at a time. So Alexa, this is obviously something that's specific to Amazon Alexa, and just talking a little bit about the architecture behind the scenes when you talk to a device and the device then connects to the Alexa service in the cloud, and then that gets delegated to the code that's running your skill. So that's kind of, we're talking about that, request and then the response that comes back through. So that pipeline.
Okay.
Well, so the Alexa part of it is that this is specific to Alexa. And so there's a communication between, kind of a system to system or like a server to server communication between the Amazon Alexa service and the service that's running your code.
Your webhook somewhere, right?
Your webhook somewhere, yeah. And kind of a typical thing if you're doing it on Amazon, you're hosting this in Lambda. And there's kind of some shortcuts that can be taken when you're connecting Alexa service to Lambda. Some benefits of doing that as well, but you might also be in situations where you want to or you're required to not host the code, and we're talking Node.js code, not host the code in Lambda. So that we're talking about some sort of other web server that's hosting this.
Right. So it's the sort of thing where you need to host it either on premises or in a private cloud, or you need to have on a specific resource so that it can access private data or for compliance purposes or whatever. You need to run this somewhere. And because you're doing that, you need to have it hosted at a public HTTPS address.
Correct.
Okay. So I think I see where this is going now.
That's kind of the catch, right? So now you've got this endpoint that's wide open for anybody to hit.
Yeah.
And you don't want that. You could get denial of service stuff. You could get rogue code. The only system that should be talking to your webhook via a post is Alexa service. So that's where the verifier piece comes. There's some piece of code that needs to sit right at that endpoint before anything else happens and verify that the incoming request is coming from the Alexa service.
Okay, this makes sense.
That's the verifier part.
Okay, and again, historically, Google had the same sort of thing. So, and this is a pretty common thing to do. Now, I know a lot of services like saying things like, we're only going to allow access from a restricted list of IP addresses. And that's kind of infeasible when you're talking about Amazon, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
So there's another way that we have to verify that the request comes in.
Yeah, and we'll provide a link. And then the purpose of this conversation is kind of talk about there is a security issue with some code that is used in the verifier piece that could be a security issue for you. And so that's the kind of where we're focusing. But we'll provide a link that talks about, well, how would you host your Alexa service on something other than Lambda, and kind of what this this verification step that has to happen. It's got stuff that has to do with headers, and it has to do with making sure that it's within a certain amount of time so you don't get replay attacks. And there's a number of different checks that the verifier does.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what the verifier does, is it's basically checking the request to make sure it fits all of these requirements.
Correct.
And so what's the middleware part of it? Where does that fit in, so to speak?
Okay. So there is a library out there called alexa-verifier, and that is the code that does this check. Somebody, a few years ago, whenever created this piece of code that does this stuff. And but I guess a popular way of exposing Node.js code or run Node.js code inside of a web server is to use something called Express or Express.js. It's code that you basically say these are endpoints that it's listening for, and if I get code I call it this endpoint, then do whatever it is that I'm going to do and return the response. And so Express.js is kind of a pipeline of different things that happen to this web request that comes in.
And that's pretty common. Express.js is what pretty much everyone uses when we're dealing with HTTP or HTTPS servers and Node. So that's pretty common.
Yeah. So Express.js calls them middleware. So you've got this pipeline of different things that you can do, and you can plug in a middleware so that at the proper point in the path, then it's going to hit this code in the pipeline and make sure things verify. So this is going to be towards the top of the stack to make sure that the requests that are coming in pass this basic level of verification before it goes to the rest of your code and actually does something with
right. So basically, this is a plugin almost.
Yeah,
that lets us say that lets us say all requests that come in need to be processed by this plugin. And what the plugin will do is it'll check the headers, make sure everything looks correct. And if it does, then it'll pass it on to your code. And if it doesn't, it'll reject it in some way.
Yeah, so you'll get some sort of an error response code that
right. And the important part about this is that this is done as early as possible and as quickly as possible, so that if it is somebody trying to do something malicious, it gets kicked out as quickly as possible without incurring any significant denial of service or slowdown or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. So
what's the issue here? I mean, this is, as you said, it's been around a while. What's the problem?
Yeah. So was running some code through like a code verifier scanner tool, just checking things, and one of the things that it checks is like, oh, is there any outstanding kind of security issues with it, and so recently ran that through and got an error on something called Node Forge. And so I think there's two different errors. We'll send you a link to one of them, but the title of it is improper verification of cryptographic signature in Forge.js. In Node Forge. And so it's talking about RSA, and it's talking about signature verification and being able to, that it would verify signatures erroneously. So in some cases you could get the okay, this is great, this is coming from Amazon, and have it really not be. Is kind of the security concern there. And so because the previous version of alexa-verifier-middleware used a specific version of Alexa-verifier, which used a specific version of Node Forge, then and the fix actually has been out since May, but it's just been till today or late yesterday that Alexa-verifier-middleware was updated to make sure that it included at least version 1.3.0 of this Node Forge.
The version that had some fixes. So
yeah,
right. So if you had done it manually, you could have patched around it. But this is making sure that now the default released version is using the correct version of the library.
Right.
Okay. So and in some ways this seems kind of, I'm sure there are a lot of people going, yeah, okay, so what? But this is really, this is one of those elements that is important to keep on top of. There are certainly some libraries where, okay, fine, you're a version or two behind. But when you're dealing with making sure that cryptographic signatures work correctly, you really need to make sure you keep on top of the right versions.
Yeah, and kind of the point is that you could have created an Alexa skill, and if you were using this Alexa verifier middleware because of how you're hosting it, you could have released the skill a year ago or 2 years ago, and just are like, hey, I'm good to go, right? And not necessarily worry about it. And you have to be more proactive on checking to see what kind of issues are coming up, and if it's something that you need to then push out a new batch of code to the server to handle.
Yeah, this is one of the tricky things when we're talking, lifetime maintenance of your code, is that over time, depending on the libraries that you're using, you will find errors. And I should point out the naive solution that a lot of people have is, oh, I'll just write my own implementation then, which is naive because the chance of you introducing the same security hole is much higher.
Yes, but it's also good because sometimes you have a choice when you're only looking for node modules to include. It's kind of a good idea to check out like what are 2 or 3 options, and check to see how many people are using it. Check to see the last time it was updated. I was looking at a package and it hadn't been updated in 5 years. Now maybe there's nothing significant that's changed, but depending on what type of dependencies it has, then it might be nothing might change in their code, but they might still need to issue an update or at least deploy a new package to npm so that you can get updates because of a dependency of a dependency of a dependency, right?
Right. So okay, so I think this is important for people to look at, but again, it's important to think about as we are building our code to make sure that we're paying attention to what our dependencies are and how they're maintained, and make sure that as we build stuff that we have something in place for how we're going to maintain it, because you can't just stick it out on the internet and assume it's just going to stay there.
That it's going to be good for lifetime. Something else, and we'll just quickly touch on this as well, because we were talking about Node.js. There's constantly new versions of Node.js that are that are coming in and are the accepted current version, but then those go out, and so it's you also have to take a look at, especially if we're using cloud, and in this case, if we're using Lambda, we have to watch to see when that starts to be supported on Lambda, and also like what version it currently is at, and if there's new features or there's even fixes to Node itself, then there's also this like, well, at what point do I update, or at what point does Lambda stop supporting new pushes of code? You could say, oh, everything's fine and I'm not going to update from Node 10 or whatever it is. But at some point in time, they're going to say you can't push any new code that's Node 10.
Right.
And if you have to do a quick hot fix at that point in time, now you're dealing with not only updating to Node 16 or whatever it is, plus you're also dealing with the fix, and that just adds time, and that would be time that your skill's not available.
Right. And it almost always, certainly it always comes at the worst time. And for some reason, there's always something that's preventing it from actually upgrading the way you expect it to. So yeah, keeping on top of updates and fixes and security issues it's a lot of work, but it's really necessary if you want to, if you're serious about doing this sort of thing.
Yeah, if you've got some kind of fun little voice experience out there that's kind of just a fun little hobby thing, then maybe you don't have to worry about it. But if it's a game that's being used by thousands or tens of thousands of people, or something that's a voice experience that's for corporate, or just a big brand like pizza delivery or something like that, then that's more of a reason to stay on top of it and have some sort of a regular
I would
cadence
disagree
of
with you slightly.
updates.
I would disagree with you slightly, Mark. I would even
Okay.
say that even for the fun hobby stuff, leaving old code out there can be a problem. And especially so if you're running it on Lambda, because
Yeah.
suddenly you're going to wake up one month and discover a $400 bill, and you're like, how in the world did this happen? And it was because somebody figured out how to exploit your
True.
your code that's just there to tell knock knock jokes, and they figured out how to exploit it to run crypto mining. So
Or write a whole bunch of records to DynamoDB, which costs you extra money, or
right.
lots of different things.
So you do, even for fun stuff, you need to at least keep an eye on what's going on out there.
That's true.
So thanks for sharing that with us, Mark. I think it's an important message and an important lesson. Love to hear how people manage their security profiles and how they keep on top of all of these changes, because it can be hard. So drop us a note, find us on Twitter, LinkedIn, comments below. We'll talk about other issues that you've seen on a future Two Voice Devs.
Two voice devs. Take care, Alan.
Take care, Mark. Have a great week.